is conflict avoidance and emotional distance, and how that the emotional distance in a marriage or any relationship can be caused by conflict avoidance. When you cannot express yourself with the person that you love, the person that you are in a marriage with, that causes stress. It causes this, to the partner to be discouraged, because every time you try to express yourself, how you're feeling, what you're going through, what's on your mind, and it causes a conflict in the relationship, then you just begin to, like you said earlier, shut down. You begin to distance yourself emotionally
Yes.
from your partner, from your loved one,
Or
and it
even
causes issues.
potentially, if your spouse won't listen to you, you'll find somebody else,
Yeah.
to confide, and maybe
Yeah.
not even intentionally.
Right.
The devil know how to set stuff up. And just
Yeah.
have someone that's friendly and willing to lend their ear, and then you find yourself, hey, I can talk to this person better than my spouse, and then you
Oh,
look.
yeah.
You gravitates toward,
Yeah.
just talking to that person rather than your spouse. You may not
Oh,
necessarily be doing anything physically wrong, but
yeah.
emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times extramarital relationships start on an emotional level, like you said, because you're able
Yeah.
to connect with someone just in conversation that you're not able to do at home with your spouse. And that's the danger of not basically being able to communicate effectively, how you're feeling about things, what's on your mind with your loved one, with your spouse. That's where you should be able, at home is where you should be able, in your marriage is where you should be able to share your true feelings, your true thoughts, like what you're thinking, what you're going through. And when you can't do that in your own home with your loved one, with your spouse, with your husband, and with your wife, that's going to cause some issues. And like you said, if you're not able to do that at home, then it could lead to extramarital affairs, and it may not start in a physical relationship, just in a emotional relationship, and then that could lead to other things if things are not fixed at home. So this is a major issue in marriages. Right now it used to be where finances was the number one factor for divorce. Now it's a lack of commitment, and again, conflict avoidance, and causing an emotional distance because of that, could lead to a lack of commitment, right? Like, I can't stay committed to this person. I can't even talk to them. So how can I be committed to them, right? Especially for the rest of my life, and I can't even express myself to them without an argument starting, right? And so this is very important, a very important issue that we are discussing this evening. We're about to have a conflict because my wife is messing with the camera.
Somebody is saying they can't. They don't.
Can you all
They
see
don't have
us?
the invite, and they're trying to.
Okay. About emotional distance. I want to share a few studies with you regarding this situation, because it's very important. It's very serious when it comes to relationships. So some current or the latest research talks about how that avoiding conflict and experiencing emotional withdrawal, because of unresolved issues and resentment, can create a cycle of emotional distance. And over time, partners may feel increasingly isolated, leading to a higher rate of divorce. And again, it may not always lead to divorce. Me and Tammy was talking about earlier how, some people, I came in the house today and I was like, hey, I'm so happy to be home. And I was, because this is my comfort zone, right? And this is where I can relax. Well, for some, she was saying, well, I'm glad you feel that way, because some people don't feel that way.
Right.
They go home and they don't feel that way. Like they avoiding as long as possible coming home. And then some stop off at the bar or the strip club or pool hall or something, just anywhere. It doesn't have to be anywhere extreme like that. It could be just stopping off at the store just to avoid, coming home right away because of what's waiting at home. Basically, a relationship where you can't express yourself, you can't share your day, what happened on your day and how you're feeling about it, because it could lead, to a conflict. You was going to say something.
No. No.
So,
Yeah, or just don't try not to be so mean, to make your spouse feel like, they don't want to come home or they can't talk to you at all. And like he mentioned earlier, stress, sometimes, we all have busy days. We're out here, we're working and job is stressful and sometimes you do be in the mood where you just don't want to talk to anyone, but we all have to always be mindful that we don't present ourselves in a way to make our spouse afraid to approach us. And that goes back to being kind. So, I'm just trying to, just think of different situations that might encourage someone to become emotionally attached outside of the home, to someone else. So.
yes. About the conflict avoidance. Many times we avoid conflict because we don't know how to communicate effectively. If one of the partners in a relationship don't have the same communication skills as the other partner, it can make it difficult to express yourself appropriately and effectively, right? And so sometimes it's just a matter of not knowing how to communicate with your spouse, right? You don't know how to communicate with your husband or wife. Many times, one spouse may be good at in having an argument. They might be good with words, right? And maybe they're more expressive, but you're not. You don't like conflict. You don't like arguments, and you're not good at it. And so when that happens, you just disengage, right? And through that ongoing disengagement, again, in emotional distance, you kind of fade away in the background in the relationship. And then, again, that's how the enemy comes in, because he comes to what? Steal, kill, and to destroy. That's how he comes in and wreaks havoc, and, he tries to destroy the relationship through that. Let's look at some more research on this, right? So sometimes there's something called quiet divorcing. Sometimes people can already be divorced from a marriage, and the other spouse doesn't know, because they've already checked out. They've checked out because of ongoing conflicts and not being able to express themselves. And so they just completely check out over time, and they're already divorced. And it's called quiet divorcing. And what it is, it refers to couples who remain married but emotionally detached from one another. This phenomenon can create a facade of a stable relationship. It can look like a stable relationship, right? This individual has already checked out, but to the outside world, to family and friends, it looks like this couple is still engaged with one another. But that's not the case, because, again, that one particular individual who is emotionally distanced from their spouse and have already checked out, they have already quietly divorced. And so, again, this couple can look on the outside like they have everything together, but that might not be the case, right? And such detachment often precedes an actual divorce, indicating a critical warning sign for couples. And so before you know it, the individual who is totally disengaged from the relationship, emotionally distanced, and have checked out already, the next thing they know, they're presenting, or that other partner is being presented with divorce papers, right? And they're shocked. Like, what happened? Why is this happening? Because they're not realizing, they haven't been really realizing or seeing what's been going on in a relationship could be for a long time, right? Could be for years. And so they're in shock. And you hear people talk about their spouse presenting them, people who are divorced, and they tell their story about their spouse just one day. It's always described as like one day this person just woke up and they want a divorce. Well, most of the time it's
built up over time.
Exactly. It's been built up over time. It wasn't just, it's just, they didn't wake up and make a decision like, okay, I want a divorce. It's been building up and building up and building up. And to the point where they're like, okay, they're already disengaged. They're already emotionally distant. and they're quietly divorced already. They just now they've just made that final decision. They have the paperwork and they're presenting their spouse like, hey, okay, this is it. And they're just making it a public announcement at that point, that this relationship is over.
Yeah, so basically, it's real important that you both are in tune with what's going on with the other person. And that goes back to not taking your spouse for granted, just
Yeah.
assuming they're always going to be there and you going
Exactly.
on with your everyday, you
Yeah.
know, activities or whatever, and,
Right.
and just totally disregarding or just forgetting or not taking the time out to just say, you know, look at your spouse, you know, and just think, hey, you know, is my wife okay, or is my husband okay? So, you know, be mindful of that. Be
Yeah.
mindful of that, and that will prevent you from being in a situation where one has emotionally checked out, you know.
Yeah.
So,
You know, one of the ways, again, another way to prevent this from happening is to, you know, have a regular time where you get together and, you know, and talk. And you do that without basically, you know, responding to the other person, just giving them an opportunity. You know, you giving each other an opportunity just to talk without interrupting. You know, you can do that over dinner. You know, you can find a nice quiet place to go, maybe away from your home environment, just to get out of that normal environment, that regular, that environment that you're always in, and you just get out of your comfort zone. Go to a place, you know, and where you can talk. Go to a park and just sit there and just allow each other to express each other's thoughts and how they're feeling without any interruption.
that's so important, yes,
Yeah.
because what you don't want to do is make your spouse feel like what they're feeling is insignificant. You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Because if you downplay it that way, then for sure they will eventually stop coming to you, you know, or see you as a person, someone that they can't talk to,
Yeah.
and they'll look for someone else to talk to.
Right, exactly. There's something called the spiral of avoidance. The spiral of avoidance concept illustrates how initial small conflicts, when avoided, can escalate over time. And we've already really discussed that. Like, you know, you wake up one morning, your spouse is giving you divorce papers, you know, and you're like, what happened? Well, it's been a buildup of, it could be little small conflicts that didn't really seem like much to you. But to the other person, like you said, not giving them an opportunity to express themselves, you know, was a big thing, right? They felt, you know, basically like they were not being respected. Or they can even feel like they're not loved
Yeah.
because they don't have the opportunity to share what's on their mind. And a lot of times, if you're minimizing how they feel, if you're ridiculing,
Yeah, you're good.
you know, if you are, you know, belittling, you know, what your spouse is sharing with you, like, oh, that's stupid. That kind of thing is, you know, could really, it seems small to you, but to the other person, that's a big thing.
And that's real hurtful, especially to a woman. I don't know from a man's point of view.
To a
you ever
man,
felt-
too.
Oh, okay.
Because a man wants to be respected, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
just like the wife, right? What were you saying about that?
No, that was what I was saying. You know, that's, you know, that can be really hurtful, you know.
So the long-term effects of emotional distance is a longitudinal study. Longitudinal study? I'm not pronouncing that name correctly, but found that emotional distance resulting from conflict avoidance can have lasting effects, not just on marital satisfaction, but also on individual mental health. So we really didn't touch on mental health too much. We talk about stress, but you know, the person who is disengaged, who is not allowed to share what's on their mind and share their feelings, they may not necessarily divorce their spouse, right? It may not go to that extreme. It may not lead to any extramarital affairs, any relationships outside of the marriage, but it could lead to someone, because they're just allowing this frustration to build up, it could cause them to start to have some mental health issues, right?
That's yes.
So, the stress can build up, the anger, just holding this anger in, for, so much, so long. It's like a balloon. Eventually it could explode. Some people, unfortunately, will try to harm themselves, you know, and not even kill themselves. Hey, I've worked as a mental health counselor, and, sometimes people cut themselves out of frustration, out of, not feeling like they're not being heard, they're not being seen, they harm themselves in other ways. And so this is a serious matter. So it's very important that we give each other an opportunity to share what's going on in our individual, thoughts and our individual lives, because we still have a life outside of the marriage. We still have a life of our own because we're all individuals. And so we all still have individual thoughts, dreams, goals, that, if we have a spouse, these kind of things should be allowed to be shared, without any kickback, without any issues, without any, again, conflict overall. And so, again, if a spouse is not a partner in the relationship and the marriage is not allowed to express themselves appropriately, anxiety can build up. Sometimes people can start to have anxiety attacks, and they've never experienced that before, right? But now all of a sudden they're having anxiety attacks, and they're feeling like what's going on with me? And they're not even themselves realizing that it's because they have all this built up, anger or built up frustration from not being able to be themselves at home, to express themselves at home, with their spouse, and they're just having to build all this up. And it can start to really take a toll on people, take a toll on our mental health, and again, start having anxiety attacks and things of that sort. So it's important, again, that we learn how to communicate effectively, communicate, just, again, taking out time with, to just express ourselves, hear each other out, and just share what's on your heart. Open dialogue is so important. Give each other time. That's the solution to this, right? Giving each other time to express, go out to eat, go have some fun together, just go for a walk. Sometimes we just go for walks, right? And I try not to over talk. I try not to talk too much, because that's my time when I like to share when I'm walking out in the open, outside. So, it's important that we give the other person an opportunity to talk as well and just not listen. Because some people are just good listeners, right? And so if you're a good listener, if one partner is a good listener, the other partner is a good talker, then it could be lopsided, right? It could be, there's an imbalance there. And so, again, both have to have an opportunity to talk.
And it's important to make sure you make that time for each other at least once a week. Once a week, make time for each other away from the kids, and to just block off friends, family, and and you two just spend that time together.
Now, sometimes in some relationships, people go, they will find a therapist to talk to, because maybe they're not able to talk to their spouse like they would like to, share some things they would like to share. And that's okay. I encourage that, especially if the therapist is a believer. Pastors, can be a confidant as well. They should be, right? Your pastor and their wife should be able to sit down with you and your spouse and be a facilitator, right? In allowing you all, kind of, to share what's on your mind and they could be like a referee to prevent any conflict, prevent any arguments. They can kind of come in and help to diffuse any potential arguments between you. So your pastors, your priest, your depends on whatever your religion is. But there are other people, your chaplain, who can serve again as facilitators, serve as just a hearing ear to help you and your spouse to go get through this season of your life if you're experiencing communication issues, right? because you don't want the husband or the wife to disengage. You don't want that to happen. You don't want them to emotionally distance themselves from their spouse. And so we don't want to give the enemy any room to come in and cause division, right? Because as we know, the scripture tells us that a house divided cannot stand. And so we definitely want to keep our relationships, united. We want to be united with our loved ones, united with our husbands and with our wives, with our marriage partners, so that we can be one, as the Bible talks about. Actually being, when you look at the original translation, is the Hebrew translation of that scripture. It talks about like being glued. It gives the image of being glued together, right? And that's, the enemy doesn't want us to be glued together. So any kind of way he can find to get in a crack, and a crack is emotional distance. A crack is conflict, unresolved conflict, right? Those are cracks that the enemy can get in. And so we want to avoid that. We want to seal those cracks as quickly as possible. If we're noticing those cracks where one or the other partner in the marriage is feeling like, hey, I just can't talk to my wife, or I just can't talk to my husband. When as soon as that come in, there needs to be someone that you can talk to, that you can go to, like I said, your pastor, your therapist, your chaplain, so that you can say, hey, we need some intervention, because we want to seal this crack in our relationship. And so that's all I got. Again, be encouraged, seal those cracks, seal those cracks in your relationship. Again, allow each other that opportunity to share what's on their hearts, and share with each other what's on your minds, so that you can be glued together, become one, and stay united, so that the enemy cannot come in and steal, kill, and destroy. Because again, a house divided can't stand, but a house united will not fall. God bless you. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.